Hi, and welcome to Faculty Focus, a podcast supporting the clinical education community in Leicester. We bring you Educator CPD, showcase new initiatives, and shine a light on some of the faculty behind it all.
Hello and welcome everybody to this episode of the Faculty Focus podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the FHEA, what it is, how do you do it and apply for it. And I'm being joined by a colleague of mine, Pip Duval, who's one of our clinical librarians here at UHL in the Department of Education, and also a fellow faculty member on the Teaching Improvement course, courses that we run within the department. So hello, Pip. Can you hear me? Good, we're finally there. We've had a lot of IT issues this morning, but I think we figured it out. So on we go. So the reason I've got Pip here is because she has actually gone through this process and applied for her fellowship of the Higher Education Authority. And I think it's quite useful to have someone who's gone through that process to give a little bit of context and an inside track, if you like, on what it involves. So I'll start, Pip, just by asking, like, what is HEA? What is the FHEA, and why would anyone want to apply for it?
Okay, so basically what I found was that quite a few colleagues, professional colleagues in the library world, had got these post-nominals, FHEA, and I was intrigued to know what they might be. I became a committee member of the CILIP, the Chartered Information and Library Information, Chartered Institute of Library Information Professionals, their committee for information literacy in 2017. And a lot of the people on that were talking about how to teach and how to train, and they all had FHEA status. I've been teaching on the Teaching Improvement course here at UHL since 2013, and I really felt like I needed some kind of grounding in education that was a proper qualification, really. And I've sort of looked into what all of these librarians were doing. So being sort of more affiliated to more university academic librarians through being part of the information literacy group meant that I could look into it a little bit further and find out what they were all doing. And it turns out a lot of academic librarians do a lot of teaching, and they have these post-nominals from having done, it's now known as Advanced HE, but it is still FHEA is what you get at the end of it. And they'd gone through this process of almost like accreditation. So I decided to look into it and see what it would involve, really.
I think that's really useful to hear, because a lot of the time when educators are coming through, if you're coming through your foundation years, or even in other allied health professions, the one thing you often hear at is, should I do a PG cert in medical education, or should I do a diploma or a master's? And that's quite an undertaking, isn't it? But yes, of course, that sort of does give you a stamp, if you like, of approval or validation. But sometimes you need another option. Sometimes people are delivering a lot of teaching, in this case in healthcare, but maybe they haven't got the time to do a 3-year course and complete a master's, or a part-time for a year and a bit and do a PG cert. And if you're doing the job, and you've been doing the job for a little while, you've obviously built up a lot of experience. You've reflected on your teaching, and this is something which might be more relevant to you or more helpful, because it doesn't require you to spend 3.5-4 grand on a PG cert course. And so I suppose it's sort of very aligned with the work that you're doing within the Department of Education, within the library. You're doing all this work anyway, so it's not something for nothing. You're just almost having that external validation, by the sounds of things, isn't it, on the stuff you're already doing?
Yeah, definitely. I'm not in a position to be able to do a PG cert in medical education because I don't have a medical degree. I'm not a doctor, but I do a lot of teaching. As part of my work as a librarian, involves lots of instruction, lots of education. And so looking for something that reflects that isn't a traditional PG cert, which I did look into, but I decided that it wasn't quite for me. And then I discovered that there was another route into the FHEA, and by doing a reflective application, basically 3,000 words, reflecting on what I do as a teacher and my approach, seemed like the most appropriate way to do it, because I'd been through similar before by having become a chartered librarian, which involved a reflective portfolio. So I knew what I needed to do in order to get it done. Not necessarily easy to do, but I knew that it could be done.
Yeah.
And so it felt like a more appropriate way for me to gain that recognition of my skills as a teacher.
Yeah. And so you went in, I think we've mentioned before, you went in at the fellow level. So it's worth noting there are different levels of the fellowship of HEA, of the Higher Education Authority. So you start off with associate fellow, and then you move to fellow. You've got a senior fellow and principal fellow. I think probably most of the people listening to the podcast will be looking, if they were thinking about the FHEA, the HEA, they'll be looking at fellow or senior fellow role, I would imagine, if you're doing a
Yeah, I
regular
think
teaching
so.
in this environment.
Yeah, when I first started looking into it, there is a sort of online quiz, if you'd like to call it that. It's some kind of it's a process to go through to answer certain questions to work out what level they think you're probably at, because there are different standards you have to achieve to be able to apply for each one. So you need to know that you're going for the right level. So I went through their online quiz, and it did come out as being fellow, which is kind of what I expected as well, because I knew other librarians were at that level. And then there is a different process for application for each one of those. So I can't speak to any of the others because I've only done the fellow application.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. We'll put the link in the show notes actually to all the websites that we're going to mention and the tool. So there is a tool on the Advanced HE website, and I'll put the link in the show notes so people can go to that and figure out what level that they might be most appropriately, might be suited to. Probably just before we go into it a little bit more, there are sort of other similar things around there. There's one you mentioned earlier in one of our conversations.
Yeah, the Academy of Medical Educators one, did we
Yes,
mean?
that's
Or are
right.
we talking about another one?
Yeah, yes, that's the one. So did you look into that at all?
I did look into that. Again, not a doctor, even though I get lots of emails from predatory journals. Dear Dr. Deval Pip, I am actually not a doctor. I do not pretend to be one, and I do not play one on a TV show either. So I looked at that, and while I did a lot of work into mapping our teaching improvement course to the AOME domains, I didn't think it was appropriate for me because I don't have that medical background. It's not something that I would want to do, even though I feel like a lot of it does overlap with the FHEA.
Yeah.
The FHEA felt like it was probably more suited to my profession, my career, although it's available to anyone doing any kind of teaching in higher education.
Yes, I think it's probably worth mentioning here that the HEA is not career specific in that if you are delivering education in that higher education arena, it doesn't really matter what your profession is, does it? I think I agree with you. The Academy of Medical Educators really is focused at doctors doing, I certainly remember hearing that around the time I was doing instructor courses for maybe ALS instructor course. The GIC is a very popular one that a lot of medics do. And there may be other colleges, other courses that perhaps colleges offer, such as supervisor courses and teacher type courses that may be affiliated. So you may have a way into Academy of Medical Educators and having that as your stamp of approval. But I think you're right. HEA is certainly one that's more widely recognised than the Academy of Medical Educators. So you decided you were going to go ahead and apply for this. You found out the level you wanted to go at. How much does it cost?
It costs £440 because UHL are not an affiliated member organisation. So if you're doing a PG cert, a lot of people have it as part of the course fees, maybe. I don't know for definite because obviously I've not been through it by that route. But there's lots of other ways of being able to do it. So a lot of people do it as an affiliated part of a PG cert, so they come out with the extra. But because we're not a member institution, I was doing it completely as an individual applying. Then the individual rate I paid was £440.
Right. Okay. So it sounds like a lot of money, but I suppose you maybe have to put it into the context of if you decided to do a PG cert, like I said, you're going to have to find 3.5, 4 grand, potentially more on some courses to do that. So when you put it in that sort of context, it doesn't actually sound like a large amount of money, but of course, yeah, you've got to find 440 quid from somewhere. So
Exactly. Yeah, it's not a small undertaking because obviously
yeah.
there's a lot of work involved as well. So you need to think about whether or not you really want to do it.
Yes, there's the cost in time and effort
Yeah.
really as well, isn't there?
But yeah, as you're right though, compared to a postgraduate degree, it's a bargain.
Yeah, particularly if you're doing the work already, so you're not having to prove yourself from scratch. You're actually taking talking about what you're doing at this moment in time. The University of Leicester is an affiliated or is a member institution, I think the term is. So if you are delivering undergraduate education regularly on a sort of formal, perhaps a slightly more formal basis, it might be worth talking to a lead at the medical school or the university and see whether that's something that they would consider funding for you through the university. So, okay, so that's useful to know. What sort of things? What's involved? You mentioned 3,000 words. What's that about?
3,000 words, yes. So there's what's great is there is a draft application template online, so you don't have to go in and do it all straight away. You don't have to do it all in one day. I was able to write and finesse my template over a number of years. Let's be honest, it has taken me a while to get to this.
You've sort of been putting it off from our
Yeah,
conversations. I remember you
it's
saying.
been on my appraisal for a very, very long time, but 2023 was the year, and I did get it done. I
So
did
if you're committed, you could do it in a short period of time.
Yeah,
it
yeah,
doesn't
you
take
can.
2-3 years to do it.
Doesn't take that long, no. But it also isn't something you can knock up in an afternoon. I discovered that as well. So I
Okay.
did a few things. Like I did some shut up and write sessions that were a bit actually focused towards getting your FHEA portfolio done. So they were great because someone did a little bit of a talk about what it meant to them. And then we had some structured blocks of time where we were on a Zoom call, but we were just sitting writing with a timer in front of us. And there were 3 blocks of writing within that, and they were really useful because I got a lot down that needed to be done, and then I was able to finesse it later. So there are sort of, you've got 3,000 words to do it in, but you've got a context statement where you have to sort of explain who you are and what kind of teaching it is that you do. And then you've got to give your evidence against 5 areas of activity. And this needs to be sort of reflective. It needs to cover their domains. And you've got this quite tight, and I am not the kind of person, I can write to a word count. Usually I'm that person who gets just 10% under, and it's absolutely fine. I'm the person who's sort of scrabbling to put extra words in, whereas most people I think are usually editing. That wasn't the case for me this time. I did actually have to edit quite a lot out. I had to change a lot of things to acronyms just so I could fit them in.
Yeah.
So
I think
it is a tight word count.
Yeah, and it's from our conversations before, it's not just a list of all the teaching you're doing, is it? I mean, in fact, it's definitely not that, because it sounds like it takes quite a lot of effort, because you'll reflect, like as you said, it's a reflective exercise, not here's a list of everything I do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't find reflection that comfortable, that easy to do. I've done it, I do it a lot, but it's not something that's ingrained within me, and I do struggle with it. So I was having to sort of set the scene very, very quickly to then explain the decisions I'd made and the reflection on those decisions, and then examples of how I've done the teaching. So examples of why I've taken certain theories and done them. And yeah, it is really difficult in a short amount of time. So you've got 5 areas with 3,000 words. You've got, that's quick maths time, 600 words. Are we right there?
Yeah, that's
600
right.
words per dimension that you've got to get a lot into, to pack a lot in, to show that you are thinking at that higher level as a very experienced educator.
Yeah. Well, that's probably perfect time now to bring in the framework that you have to use when you're writing this piece. So, tell us about the framework that they set out and that you have to sort of align your writing with.
So in the framework, there's these 5 areas of activity. One is about designing and planning learning activities and or programs of study. So it's not just when you're delivering someone else's teaching, it's, these are teaching sessions that I have planned and I have put together, and explaining the context of those and why you've done them. The second is teaching and or supporting learning, so the actual physical process of doing the teaching. The third is giving feedback. That's the one that I struggled with the most, actually, because a lot of my teaching is actually quite instructional. So the feedback I give is not detailed feedback. So that was one of the areas I found really, really hard. The fourth is developing effective learning environments and approaches to supporting students. And then finally, the fifth one is engaging in continuing professional development in pedagogy as well. So actually showing that you do care about teaching as a discipline in itself. so that you're not
Yeah.
just going out and delivering the things you need to deliver. You are actually considering what it means to be a teacher, what it is you're
Right.
trying to do as a teacher.
Yeah. And you had they last year, I think, brought out a revised standards framework. So the one that you did, I think you said was 2011. Was that?
Yeah, so I will admit, part of my part of the drive to get it done last year was so I was able to get it done under the guidelines that I'd registered under for 2011, because I couldn't face doing everything else from
Redoing it.
scratch. Yeah.
So we'll put the link into the show notes. But yes, there is a standards framework, and so the terminology here is probably worth clarifying, because it can get a bit confusing. Took me a couple of reads. So it sounds like, so what you've described is areas of activity, and that is one of 3 dimensions.
Yes.
So the other dimensions are professional values, and
Yep.
the other one is core knowledge. So there's core knowledge, professional values, and areas of activity.
And you have to weave your professional values and core knowledge into your statement for the areas of activity.
Right.
So you have to demonstrate. So not all of them can be demonstrated in all of the areas, but you have to somehow show your professional values being displayed through the things that you do in your activity. So throughout my template, I've got my one of my drafts here, and I have actually put in brackets which value I think something refers to, or which core knowledge. So they're K's and V's, and so I've got in brackets things like core knowledge of how students learn is important for this workshop, brackets K3, just to show that this is where I think it adds to it.
How you're applying the dimensions and statements to your own activities. Yeah. And so it sounds like quite a lot to navigate, like keeping your head as you're writing it, but there are specific descriptors for specific levels. So if you're going, when you went in at fellowship level, there's a document that says, right, you're going in at fellow level, this is the sort of stuff that you need to be talking about. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And I had that printed off and next to my desk as I was writing the whole time, because I need something to refer back to, and I need something visual to look at to make sure I'm doing it.
Yeah. So that's quite useful, isn't it? Because it's essentially very similar to a job application, isn't it? You want to answer the questions that are in front of you, rather than just plow on and give the answer that you'd like to give. Good. So that's really important. So there's actually quite a lot of support on the website there for you to read through and to make sure that you're doing it correctly. When you go through the process, I assume so once you've submitted, what sort of happens then? Is it yes?
So it goes to a panel. I was really lucky. To go back to sort of the start of it, I was really, really lucky that through being a member of the Information Literacy Group Committee, I knew a few people who actually had mentored others through it. So I was able to use my network to help me just get a bit of a head start on what needed to be done. So I was really lucky that a wonderful lady called Sam Aston gave me some amazing feedback on my work, and I was able to go backwards and forwards to her a few times to actually get it finessed to the standard that I was happy to submit it at. When it comes to submitting, you then have to paste your word sections into the website, so there is no going over the word limit. It knows. So at that stage, I still had to go back and edit certain bits out, and then it timed out on me a couple of times. I had to keep making sure I'd pasted the new edit version back into a Word document. It was quite terrifying. So having to do it and making sure it's definitely under the word count. And it's not, I don't think it was 600 words for each section, but it did have an overall word count.
Yeah.
You also have to make sure you reference it properly. So I did have to make sure I'd done some reading around the topic. And so while some of those references will be quite helpful for others, some may not be, because they're very specific to me as a librarian doing teaching. So I had to make sure my references were in there. I had to make sure they were done properly. Referencing is very important, says the librarian. But we do have software that will help you do that. So please come and talk to us in the library. So I had to put those in, and then you can save it as you go along. Then save it, and then at that point you really do have to put your credit card details in. At the point of submission, you have to put your credit card details in. And what then happens is it goes to a panel. I don't know exactly how often the panel meet. I don't know exactly who makes up the panel, but your work is actually read by somebody, and they will, if they don't think it is up to scratch, they will give it back to you, and you're given one chance to resubmit, and that's it.
And otherwise
and then I assume if you don't get it the second time, you lose your money.
All right. Okay.
I don't know for sure, because thankfully that did not happen to me.
So you get 2 bites at the apple. Okay.
Yes.
That's worth knowing for your 440 quid. Okay.
Yeah.
And I remember writing some sort of reference or statement
Yes, there is that as
for
well. So
you.
you can't just send it off saying this is what I think. You have to find two colleagues who are aware of your teaching practice and get them to write you a reference as well, which is not structured, I don't think. Didn't you just
I
get a
don't
blank piece of
remember it,
paper?
no. I think there was a couple of principle, like guidance, a couple of sentences, but yeah, no, it's pretty open.
Yeah, you weren't really given it. And I know I've done a reference for one of our colleagues from the Department for Education, Department for Clinical Education. Um, and I was given, I think I've done two actually, and I was given quite free rein to say. So I just talked about what I'd observed of them as a teacher and how I felt that they followed principles of, educational theory and that sort of thing. But you don't need to reference the reference.
The statements, not as
Yeah. So
academic. Yeah.
yeah, so I just bribed two colleagues to write about just less than a page of A4 about how wonderful I am,
Oh,
and which was
you don't need to bribe
yeah,
us. You
exactly,
are
and it was
good at what you do. So
obviously no problem at all for you because it just speaks for itself how wonderful I am.
quite right, quite right. So you got your approval, you got it first time. What's the deal long term then? Do you have to sort of resubmit every 5 years or something, or you got it now for
I hope
life?
not.
Or?
No, thankfully, I don't think so. Thankfully, now I've got them. Those post nominals are there. They're mine to keep. No one can take them away from me.
Excellent.
So if you have annoyed me in an email, you will get the one with my post nominals on my signature. But if I like you, you just get BW Pip. So just word to the wise there.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Uh,
that they're yours to keep forever. As
Excellent.
a chartered librarian, I can revalidate my chartership if I want to, free of charge, as often as I like. I've done it once and it wasn't that onerous. So if they brought something in, I imagine it would be a similar sort of thing, but it doesn't look like there's any plans for them to make you revalidate. So once you've done it, you've done it. Obviously, that's not, you shouldn't just do things for that sake though, not just for the post noms. Part of the fifth dimension or the fifth area of activity is that you're engaged in professional development. So if it comes naturally to you, that's something you're doing anyway, and that is something that comes naturally to me rather than the reflection. I am always wanting to professionally develop. I am always wanting to do better and to assess what I'm doing, even if I don't do it in the most reflective way. So I think it is sort of ingrained within it. It's not formalized. You don't have to revalidate.
Yes, I'd imagine it's quite a useful exercise to do for something like an appraisal, or even if you've been in education, you've been doing education for a while. Maybe you just want to take stock of where you're at, and we don't often get those opportunities. It reminds me a little bit of the exercise we do with teaching philosophies on the teaching improvement courses. Sometimes we don't have that time to think about our teaching, and this feels like it's one of those opportunities for you to, take stock, reflect, think about maybe potential ways to go forwards and develop. So
Yeah,
quite a useful exercise in itself.
yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think I've found it very, very useful. I should have done it sooner than I did. However, I don't think it's something you could do without having done a certain amount of teaching.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's where the fellow bit fits anyway. So
Yeah.
the fellow role is sort of someone who does a bit of teaching, but it's not their main role. A senior fellow would be someone whose teaching is their main role, essentially.
Yeah.
So yeah, you need something behind you to be able to write about it. You can't be reflective about something you've not done yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think and it would be useful to do it regularly. I'm not
Yeah.
sure if I will, but as part of the
Yeah.
appraisal process, as part of, I have what I like to call valuable thinking time. If I can squeeze it in to my
Yeah.
working week, I will do a little bit of staring into space and thinking, am I doing this? Is this the best way I could possibly do this? So while I'm
Yeah.
not filling in a reflective portfolio on the regular, like some people have to, I am thinking, is this the best way of doing things?
Yeah.
Could we do it better? Is this where we want to be? Am I teaching the way I want to teach?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really useful. That we certainly, a lot of people have SPA time if you're a consultant, and if you're a doctor in training, you have increasingly now. I'm pretty sure most programs have SPA equivalent sort of time for this sort of thing. Developing yourself, CPD type activities. So excellent. So has it changed how you teach, or has it given you sort of ideas for the future, or?
I think what it's done is crystallized my thinking about my teaching. It's made me realize that there are certain things that I do that might be personal quirks, but actually are effective things to do in teaching. It's definitely made me feel more confident as a teacher, because it's quite hard to stand up in front of a group of people who are in a different professional group to you, and say that you are qualified to tell them something. And while I always had the experience, and I've always come from a point of view of saying, I may not be an expert, but I have experience in this. It's nice to be able to say, I also have this qualification. I have gone to the effort of making sure that what I'm doing is up to scratch.
Yeah, yeah, and you don't just pick these things up like you go to the shops and pay 440 quid and off you go and you've got your qualification. You need to have done a substantial amount of work to get to that point to even apply. So, it is a genuine recognition of your expertise and abilities. So yes, it is a kind of almost stamp of approval or stamp of validation. Great. Okay. Well, I've realised we've been talking for a little while on the FHEA. I thought we'd sort of try and bring it to a bit of a close. Any sort of final take-home points, do you think, for listeners, anyone that might be interested in looking into this?
I think it's definitely worth a go. If you don't want to go to the full extent of undertaking a PG cert for a whole year, then it's definitely something that you can use to consolidate and show off what you already know. If you're already teaching, all it is getting down on paper what you do and why you do it. So it feels like a very pragmatic way of getting that stamp of approval for the education that you're already delivering.
Yeah, it's I think for me it's knowing where to go to find out what it is you need to think about, what level you need to be providing evidence for, and so it takes, I think for me, it's not an impossible task. It is put into the context of other things you could be doing to show your enthusiasm or your ability in education. It's just one of those extra strings to your bow potentially if you're looking to develop as an educator, and perhaps, like you say, you haven't got the time or the money to do more formal postgraduate study. So that is great. Well, thank you very much, Pip. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
And I'm sure there'll be a lot of that our listeners will find interesting, food for thought. And of course, like I said, we'll put all the links to the various tools and resources on the show notes, so our listeners can go away and have a read of that. And of course, this is something that's been on my plate for a little while, so I might be sending you a statement request for at some point in the future. But yeah, I'll go and read through all that material myself.
You can't copy my homework.
Yeah, I think they won't believe the librarian aspects. I can't cut and paste. I'll have to change my professional groups. Right. Okay. Well, thanks very much, Pip. I'll let you get on with the rest of your day. And if there's anyone who's got any questions, then please get in contact with the podcast and we can put you in contact with myself or Pip if you wanted to discuss further. But there are lots of people in the trust who have gone through this process. So, and you'll probably see their lapel badges that say FHEA. So there's lots of people around who can talk to you if you're interested in pursuing this. Right. That's it. Thank you very much. We'll see you soon. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Faculty Focus podcast. If you liked the episode, please share with friends and colleagues. You can also like and subscribe to the show and perhaps even leave a review. Clinical education can be tough, but we're stronger as a community, so if you have an idea for an episode or would like to come on and talk to us, do get in touch via email or Twitter. Details in the show notes. The Faculty Focus podcast, Community Development Showcase.